Hello and welcome to Series 4, Episode 3 of In Suspense, a podcast and vodcast for fans and writers of crime fiction. I'm Leslie Cara and my co-host is the wonderful Lauren North.
Hello.
And what a fabulous start we've had to Series 4. In the first episode, we chatted to the amazingly successful Shari LaPena about a writer's year and the highs and the lows, really, the real struggles of what it's actually like writing a book a year, which is no mean feat, even though I know some people do even more than that, including Laurie. But it's tough. It's tough. And it was a great episode, actually. Shari was very honest and we had a really in-depth conversation, and we've had some great feedback from people that they've really appreciated that honesty and that it's helped them because it's made them realise, that it affects everyone. And then we had a sneaky extra episode last week where we spoke to Becca Day, who Lauren has been mentoring, and she had some fantastic news about a new book deal, largely thanks to Lauren, her obviously skill at writing and Lauren's mentoring. I'm sure, Lauren,
Don't give me that credit.
Huge help. No, Becca was really interesting to talk to, and we Lauren and I, if you missed that episode, do tune in because we're offering an opportunity for a writer of thrillers or psychological crime fiction, to be mentored, not just by one of us, but by two of us. So you get double the input. And I think, Laurie, can you remind everybody what we said? There was a deadline, wasn't there?
Yep, so the deadline is, I think, the 8th of October. So just send an opening email with an introduction and maybe the first 500 words would be great.
But, if you are interested and you haven't listened or watched the last episode, do watch it or listen
all the
to it now,
information
because
in there,
there's a lot more detail in that, and I think you really need to hear that if you want to apply. Our topic this week is author well-being, and we have novelist and clinical psychologist Philippa East coming on the show in a minute to talk to us about how we can stop being so stressed and enjoy being a writer. Laurie, I've rambled on long enough. Say something quick.
I think, as you say, it can't come soon enough, can it, for both of us? Because I think we're both quite stressed, and both for different reasons. Because you've obviously got a lot going on in your personal life with moving, and my stress is there's just a few different things. Like I'm waiting for news, and I've got a book I'm supposed to write, but I can't concentrate, and I'm finding that quite stressful. And then my son's school is started, and it's just so much admin, and it sounds so little, but sometimes it doesn't take much if you're not in the right frame of mind for it to feel quite stressed. So I certainly was feeling stressed last week and couldn't sleep very well. I'm feeling better today, but I've given myself the week off of writing, so there's no pressure this week to write. I just want to do a bit of plotting and exercise, and that's all I want to do this week. But it is stressful. There are times when it is very stressful, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, isn't it, really, because last year I was sort of stressed about the writing but this year I'm not actually stressed about the writing. I'm really enjoying writing.
Oh, good.
It's just everything else. It's moving. Moving is a huge stressor.
It's on the list of the most stressful things you can do, isn't there? Right next to writing a book.
Yeah, and when your parents are moving as well, and you're having to clear their bungalow.
What do you find the most stressful stage of writing a book for you? What is it?
Ooh, the most stressful stage, I think, is the structural edits, to be honest. Actually, no, that is stressful. That's one of the most stressful. But another stressful part is when you're coming to the end of writing the first draft. So, for example, starting a book, I always find incredibly exciting, and I feel free, and I feel, I enjoy the process of writing. But then when you hit various hurdles, don't you, in terms of word count, you get to about 20,000 words.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I do anyway. And I think, what next? And how am I going to get over this next lump? And then you get to the middle, and that's good. And then you think the rest is going to be plain sailing. But often that second half throws up all sorts of problems and plot holes and things you hadn't anticipated. and planned for, and then you get your knickers in a twist. So that last stage of the first draft, when you're coming up to your deadline, that's quite stressful, isn't it? Do you find that?
Yeah, I was just thinking about what stage. I think structural edits can be stressful, but for me, actually, it's publication. I find the month of publication, which is what I'm living through at the moment, that's another reason I'm quite stressed, I think. I find it quite stressful because there's lots of little things that happen. Like there's like podcast interviews and articles that you write, and there's just and being a lot more involved on social media, I find as well. And I think it just bleeds into your time a bit. And I think next time around, I'm going to schedule for that to have happened a bit more and work it into my schedule a bit, because I think I find that, I mean, I just like to write the books in my study and go to the gym, and that's what I really want to do, and everything that gets in the way of that kind of adds, I think, to the stress for me.
Yes, we're very much creatures of routine, aren't we? I think.
Yeah.
And anything that disrupts that routine. And I think you were saying when we were talking to Shari, anything, when life throws you a curveball, and if you are, you're juggling lots of things and you're managing quite well, and then something else happens, and that just tips the balance, doesn't it?
Yeah, it can. So what do you look for when you know you're not coping? So what do you see in yourself when you think, yeah, this is me not coping?
Okay, I start to get snappy with Rashid.
Yeah.
And he doesn't deserve it because he's very kind and helpful and lovely. But if I find myself snapping at him, I think, oh, I know that something's amiss. Also, if I find that I just get quite a lot of headaches, I might get a migraine or something. Maybe not sleeping so well. They're signs to me.
Yeah.
And just that feeling of being overwhelmed and
There, doesn't it?
yeah, yeah. I do recognise it. I mean, I have suffered in the past from depression, but I don't so much now because I recognise the signs when that's coming, and it is normally to do with burnout and things like that. And I can put in strategies. So at the moment, because of the move, I don't feel stressed, sort of depressed, stressed or anything like that. It's just I've got a lot to do.
Yeah.
And that kind of is always on your mind. Got to phone solicitors, got to phone estate agents, got to do this, got to do that, blah 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 blah. But in terms of writing, I think it's just a matter of what helps me, and I don't know whether Philippa might talk to us about this. What helps me is remembering why I wanted to be a writer. And the reason is I like writing. I enjoy the process of writing. And I think if you can get into that mindset where you completely forget all the other stuff, and just while you're in that zone, just focus on enjoying writing, that can be like a refuge, really, a sanctuary.
Yeah. I think you're right. And I think one of the things that I'm most frustrated about, and I think is adding to my stress levels at the moment, is that I haven't got a lot of concentration. So I'm trying to sit and write, and I'll do 10 minutes before I'm suddenly on social media again. And I know that part of that is because it's my publication month, but I think it's also that I just haven't got that level of concentration that I had before the summer holidays. And I don't know quite how to get it back. I feel like I need to train my brain. And someone was recommending some concentration music, actually. So I'm going to try that next time I sit down to write, to try and get myself in the right headspace. But yeah, I find that frustrating. So I'm hoping Philippa might have some tips on that one as well. How's your concentration?
Yeah, we're expecting an awful lot from Philippa.
We are, yeah.
We want her to cure all our problems.
Yeah, we're not letting her go until she has.
Sorry, what was the question, Laurie? I'm too stressed. I didn't hear it.
Oh God, I've forgotten it because I'm so stressed. I think it was, how's your concentration?
Oh, okay.
For writing?
Not brilliant, to be honest. I mean, do you know, actually, we've just come back. We were in Suffolk for a weekend dog sitting for my brother and his...
Oh, I saw the photos. Liver treats.
While they went to Italy to see their daughter. And actually, although it's come at a very busy time, and my brother was feeling a bit guilty, oh, you're so busy, and you feel bad that you've got to come and dog sit for us. But actually, it was quite good for us both to get away from the house and all the boxes and just be. And we managed to sort of sit in their lovely sunny conservatory and read and just be, for a few days. There were other things we had to do as well, admin-y things. But somehow when you're in someone else's house, you don't feel the need to do chores, do you?
No, should think not.
So so that was good for us. I've forgotten the question again. God, what am I like?
Concentration levels. I'm terrible at the moment. Can't
This is what
concentrate on the question.
this is the exact point, isn't it? It's just focusing on things, and I understand what you're saying about publication week. I usually quite enjoy publication month. I don't get worried about it because the way I deal with it is there's nothing you can do. Then it's out of your hands. It's gone. You've just got to sort of enjoy that little moment of fanfare and then really get back into a routine.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I'm not worrying about the reviews so much. It's more just that there's more to do for it, I think. And it's putting myself out of my comfort zone a lot more as well, because I do like to be in my PJs at 5 o'clock. And then if I've got an event, then I have to look nice, or well, from the top up anyway. Yeah, it's just like you say, it's a change of routine and we are creatures of habit, as you say. So I definitely think there's a lot going on this month for me, but I'm trying to be a bit kinder to myself this week, and I'm not very good at that, so fingers crossed for me.
I will keep them firmly crossed for you. But luckily, we've got the lovely Philippa East coming on to help us with all these stressful problems. And we've given her a huge sort of remit, really, haven't we?
We have.
Got a lot of work to do, so I hope she's geared up for it. So, yes, welcome, Philippa East.
Hello, Philippa, and welcome to In Suspense.
Hello, lovely to be here.
And we are very, very grateful for you coming on. And as we said in our introduction, we have got a lot to cover today, and we've got a lot of help that we need. So thank you so much for coming on. I'm going to start by reading your bio so that those who don't know you can get to know you a bit better. So Philippa East is the author and clinical psychologist. She grew up in Scotland before moving to Oxford and then to London to complete her clinical psychology training. A few years ago, she left the NHS to set up her own part-time practice and dedicate more hours to writing. The result was her debut novel, Little White Lies, which was longlisted for the Guardian's Not the Booker Prize and shortlisted for the CWA New Blood Award 2020. Philippa's next book, Safe and Sound, is another twisty and compelling tale, and one I immensely enjoyed reading. Would you like to start by telling us a little bit about Safe and Sound and where the idea came from? And I read it last week and really found it so gripping and rather harrowing with some of the characters involved.
Yes, absolutely. So obviously, as you said, Safe and Sound is my second novel. And it basically opens with our protagonist, who is a housing manager called Jen. She arrives at work one day, and on her to-do list is a visit to a tenant who is behind on their rent, and she has to go there and meet the bailiffs and knock on the door, which is not the most pleasant part of her job. So she arrives at the flat with the bailiffs. They can hear a radio playing inside the flat, so they're pretty sure that she's in there. They knock on the door, but there's no reply. And they take a little peek through the letterbox and realise that there is a whole mound of post piled up in there, which obviously is slightly concerning, slightly worrisome. They keep knocking, no one is answering. Eventually they really sense that something is not right here, so they try to open the door with a master key, but they discover that it's chained from the inside, and that's the point at which they call the police. When they finally get into the flat, they find this radio is playing. There's a little dinner table which is set out for what looks like 3 people, so 2 guests, but they also find a body curled up on the sofa, and they quickly realize that the tenant, who's called Sarah Jones, who is known as a young, charismatic, pretty, sociable woman, has died in her flat, and her body's been there for 10 whole months. So Jen, the housing manager, is thrown into the mystery of what has happened. She's obviously experiencing a lot of guilt about what's happened, not least because she was supposed to do an annual check on the flat a number of months ago, but because of things going on in her own life, she missed it. So Jen takes it upon herself to try and investigate what on earth has happened to this young woman, basically. And that's what the reader will discover as well.
And what sort of inspired you to write that then, Philippa? That sounds an amazing premise.
Well, sadly, it's actually based on a true story. When I was embarking on writing this book, a lot of people were just sort of like, I just don't. That's just so unrealistic. It's so like, how could that really happen? But actually, it was based on a true story of a woman called Joyce Vincent, who was a woman in her 30s living in London, and she was found dead in her bedsit. And they calculated it was nearly 3 years after she had died, and she was only in her late 30s. And there was a filmmaker called Carol Morley who heard about this case, read about it in the newspapers, and took it upon herself to track down old friends and acquaintances and colleagues of Joyce to try and again piece together how this had happened. And what was completely shocking for me when I watched this docudrama, which is called Dreams of a Life, is a lot of Joyce's old friends had heard about this case in the papers as well, and even realized that the name was the same, but just had not connected it with the Joyce that they knew. They just heard about this, random person whose death had gone unnoticed, and when they realized that it was their Joyce. So yeah, I watched that film and I just could not get it out of my head. I was just so haunted and moved by it. And we're writers, so that's how we process stuff, right? We put it in a book.
Yeah, that's really sad, but a great premise for a novel. I can't wait to read it. I really can't. I'm afraid I haven't yet, because as you can see, I've had a few other things going on.
I can see your TBR piles and things. Yeah. Oh, and the moving box. Oh, it's a moving box.
I'm moving. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
But I'm very much looking forward to reading it. I mean, I've got it up on my screen here. Look, ready to go. I was wondering, for a psychological suspense author, it must be really useful and very interesting to be a clinical psychologist. And so I think Laurie and I were both wondering really how much of that sort of, that part of your background comes into your writing. How much do you draw on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I definitely do. I think that having a degree, having a background in psychology is really helpful. Sometimes for me, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, because I feel like there's a big onus on me to portray psychologically plausible characters. Like if someone was like, oh, this character is so annoying and stupid and she's supposed to be a psychologist. But no, I think I definitely draw on it a lot. And I would also say that for me, studying psychology and then later in life writing are kind of two sides of the same coin, in that I'm just trying to make sense of people. That's what my whole life seems to be about. And initially I tried to scratch that itch, and still scratch that itch through training and working as a psychologist. But I think I also do it in my writing as well, just trying to work people out really, and trying to explore how they function. But certainly for writing safe and sound, I mean, a bit like you said, Lauren, you described it as a bit harrowing. And I think in some ways it is quite a difficult book to read. Some of the responses that I've had so far from readers, although they've been very positive, they've talked about how, particularly with Jen, who suffers from an anxiety disorder, it's quite hard reading at times, I think. And I think I drew both on my professional background, but also, I mean, we're going to be coming on and talking about this, but also when I was writing, or particularly editing the book, I was going through a really stressful time myself. And I think that's ended up on the page, to be honest. I think a lot of what I was experiencing in myself kind of spilled out into my writing. So apologies for the stress, readers. But on the other hand, I hope some people who are familiar with struggles with anxiety would feel that they could recognize something of their own experience in Jen as well.
Yeah, and I think especially with Jen, you have this character who clearly isn't always functioning as well as she could. And there were times when you just wanted to sort of take her to one side and sort of say, you need to take a breath and look at how you are coping. But you can sort of see her mindset, like, oh, I'm not hungry, I'm okay, I'm just going to keep going. And it is frustrating for the reader, but also quite hard to read, especially if you, like you say, you've been through it yourself. So you can definitely get that from the book. And you talked a little bit about your characters just now. They are very complex and with a lot of history woven in, which I found really interesting. So I wondered, how do you go about creating your characters? Do you have a particular process where you sort of think about their backstory, and how does that work for you?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think quite often I feel like characters come to me as they are. I never feel like I'm constructing characters. I very often feel like I'm constructing a plot. I struggle with plot. I really sometimes feel like, this sounds silly to say as a writer, but that I'm making it up. whereas with characters, I rarely feel like I'm making them up. I feel like I'm discovering them or getting to know them or figuring them out, but they are who they are right from the outset. And it might be, like I say, it's more a case of me getting to know them rather than constructing them. I definitely can't do, those kind of quite basic character questionnaires that, favorite color and date of birth and stuff like that. That doesn't work for me, because it feels like, I feel like I'm making it up when that's not how people work. So I think I often just have to sort of sit with them and let them tell me about themselves. I've sometimes used a little tactic of pretending to interview my characters, which I suppose would be a little bit like what I would do in a therapy consultation. I would just talk to them and ask them questions and get to know them that way. Or sometimes there's a scene in Safe and Sound where I was struggling with Jen's character. I was struggling to work out, what is she about? Why is she the way that she is? What is her emotional world? What is her operating system? And then there's a scene where she goes to the local swimming pool, and that scene came to me, and I was like, oh, I get it. I understand how she works now, like just how she behaves in that scene. And yeah, so I think that's kind of how characters work for me, I think. Yeah.
Very interesting.
That is.
Oh, and on the backstory thing, I think the backstory, I think again, through my work as a psychologist, we're not just the way that we are for no reason. Our experiences, our life experiences, have a huge part to play in shaping who we are and how we engage with the world and how we respond to things. So I think that's just natural for me to see them as a person with a history, because that's how a person is anyway. You can't really just have someone who's just got all these character traits with no context, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It does make sense. Yeah, that's fascinating, actually, and the way that they come fully formed. But I suppose in a sense they're not. You are creating them, but from your wealth of experience, just life experience and meeting all the different people that you've met, you've come across so many different characters, I guess, that they're a big sort of field to pick from. And it's just, I find that fascinating. And I think I'm a little similar. They sort of, a character arrives in your head and you kind of know what they're like, and it's kind of magic, isn't it? A little bit of magic involved. But our topic for today, Philippa, is author well-being. And actually, it can't come at a better time for Laurie and myself, because we were talking a little bit before you came on today about how stressed we've both been for various different reasons. I'm moving, Laurie's got other issues that's going on, and it's a year when we felt quite stressed, as have a lot of people, I'm sure. And we thought that as an author and a psychologist, you're in a really good position to sort of talk about the stresses and challenges that writers face, and how just being a writer and having to sort of write and meet deadlines and all the whole business that's associated with being a writer, how that contributes to our stress and anxiety. I mean, what's your sort of take on that?
Yeah, I think it's such an interesting question. Actually, one of the I remember when I first joined the Society of Authors, and I was having a look around their website, and I came across a section on health and well-being, a lot of it talking about mental health. And at that stage I was like, why have they got a whole section on mental health here? Like, they're just an organization like any other organization. Why do they have a whole section on mental? I thought it was great. I thought it was brilliant, but I was just surprised that was so front and center. But as time's gone on, I think, we talk a lot about the specific mental health issues that come up for us as authors or creative people in a creative industry. And when I was kind of thinking about this question in preparing for today, I wrote a whole list and I've got them. I was like adding more and more things. I was like, oh my God, and that. So I think, first of all, I was thinking it's such a unique profession. I mean, the percentage of people in society who are professional authors is tiny, really tiny. It's not a job that people are familiar with. It's not, lots of people know someone who works in retail or finance or teaching or healthcare. We kind of familiar with these professions, but being a writer, it's such a unique profession. So it's kind of unusual to have friends and family who are in it as well, who get it. So a lot of the time, your subjective experiences of what it's like doing that career are not necessarily shared. And also, I think as part of that, people see it as like the dream, like you're living your best life, you're living your dream. So it must all just be roses and daisies, right? And you kind of just let creativity flow out of your head and you're just in this place of bliss the whole time. And of course, it's not like that. So there's that strange. And also, I think there's a feeling that you shouldn't complain about it because you have achieved this massive dream and this massive goal. So I think we can put pressure on ourselves to feel like we shouldn't whine, or it's easy to feel a little bit unsupported by people who might envy us actually and don't want to hear us whinging about what is effectively a job that, like everybody else's job, has challenges and has stresses. And even though we can say that we enjoy it, doesn't mean that it's easy and doesn't mean that it's fun all the time. In fact, it's quite rarely super enjoyable and super fun. It can be really satisfying, and there can be points where it is really enlivening and really we're really getting a kick out of it. But that's not the normal day-to-day. Well, not for me anyway. I don't know about you guys. Shall I just carry on? I've got a whole list. So I was thinking as well that it's a bizarrely uncertain profession as well. And as human beings, we tend not to like uncertainty. I think people are on a spectrum of how much certainty versus uncertainty we like. Some people are more fluid and flexible and spontaneous and don't mind a little bit of kind of riskiness in their lives. And other people are obviously much more like predictability and planning. But generally, as a species, we're not great with uncertainty. We find uncertainty fundamentally threatening, because if we go back to cave person era, uncertainty means there might be a lion about to eat me. It's on life and death, right? So uncertainty is automatically linked with a sense of anxiety. So we have the uncertainty of, we're often on contracts that are kind of 2 years, 3 years at a time, and then we don't know what's going to happen with that. We have uncertainty about our sales. We have uncertainty about our reviews. We have uncertainty about, is our editor going to reply to the email? We have uncertainty about what's the marketing plan for our newest book. So there's just a lot of uncertainty, like things not being guaranteed. And I think connected to that as well, creativity, doing a task which is creative is by definition uncertain. Creativity is uncertain, right? We don't have a template for how to write a book. It's not like our boss comes and puts a to-do list on our desk and we just have to tick the tasks off. We've got to live in this space of massive uncertainty when we're creating. We don't know our characters. We don't know the plot. We don't know the ending. We don't know if it's working. And that is trying to marry that with things like you mentioned, deadlines and an editor wanting a very specific book that works for the market and has a perfect hook. That's really difficult.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there about that uncertainty. I mean, we kind of all know that, but to hear you explain that in a really, lucid way, that's really, makes perfect sense why we're all a bundle of nerves.
I'm nodding like a nodding dog at the moment.
Those of us who like routine and know what to expect. We're always waiting and we're always unsure what's about to happen. And also, I think, as you were saying, people might be envious because the idea of the writer, it has been sort of romanticized, hasn't it, over the years, that we're just, as you say, lying around creating and enjoying ourselves and writing a line of poetry here and a novel there. And of course, the reality is it's a job like any other. So that was a fascinating answer.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. Now, I hate to bring up the dreaded P word, but the pandemic has affected all of us in many different ways. And one thing I'm noticing many authors saying, and this is myself included, is that our concentration levels just aren't what they used to be pre-pandemic. And I personally feel like I can manage like the last few weeks, sort of 10 minutes at a time before I sort of find myself straying back to social media. And then 20 minutes has gone by before I remember I'm supposed to be writing and feel quite frustrated with myself. I just wondered what your thoughts are on this and what advice you give to anyone who's struggling with concentration, because I personally would really love to break the pattern a bit.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's situation is different, so I'll give some general tips, but if they don't work for you, don't blame me, please. Because a lot of the time in trying to figure out what will be helpful in terms of our thought patterns or moods and stuff, it's very individual actually. But I think, concentration, I think it probably, in part, you mentioned the pandemic, and I would maybe connect it back to what we were saying a moment ago about how our brains don't like uncertainty. Whether it's kind of stuff going on in your own life that's a bit uncertain, but the whole country is very uncertain at the moment. The whole world is really uncertain. And going back to what we were saying about uncertainty feeling like a threat that puts us on edge, because it's a sense of we don't know what might be hiding in the bushes that could jump out and eat us. Our brains struggle to focus because they're constantly kind of looking around to think, is there something I need to be worried about, almost like mentally looking over our shoulder all the time. And the idea of just focusing on a task like writing, that old, still not very evolved part of our brain is saying, but there might be a lion behind me about to eat me. How can I just sit here and focus on telling a story? And I think it's quite weird because although our brains are still kind of adapted for, prehistoric times, most of the threats and stresses that we have today are not physical. We don't have lions stalking us in the jungle. We have modern day stresses, which are primarily psychological. They are things like, what am I going to do if I can't pay my bill this month or whatever. So our brains don't really know how to deal with that kind of sense of nervousness and anxiety, because you can't look over your shoulder and say, oh, there's no lion, that's fine, I'll get back to work. It's not joining up in that way. So I think what our brains do is try to kind of find something to do that makes us feel a little bit more like I'm solving the problem. When we go and do another task, like go on Twitter or something, and Twitter's almost like, I think social media can be a bit like a baby sucking its thumb. It's kind of like a self-soothing strategy. I think sometimes you just go on there and you're kind of numb out for a little bit. And also because of the way social media is, there's this kind of bottomless flow. Time passes in a really bizarre way. Like you say, there's 20 minutes gone because your brain can't register time on social media properly like it can with, say, a TV show where you get a sense of, the story being told and time passing. So, okay, what to do? So I think maybe one of the things to have a think about is, have you got any kind of routine for getting into your writing space and your writing time for the day? Or are you kind of just rushing around in the morning, getting sorted out, and then you just sit down at your desk and expect to be really super focused? So it might be thinking about some things you can put in place to transition from, so to speak, real life with all its stresses and strains to that quite vulnerable bubble that you need to be in to be creative. And it's easy for that bubble to get burst. So sometimes I might suggest, if there are things that you've got to do or things that are worrying you, kind of just write them down in a list and set them aside. So you know what they are. Your brain knows that you've got a plan for them, but you're not taking them with you into the writing space, kind of putting them to one side. Maybe doing some relaxation stuff before you get into your writing session, so that you're trying to calm your brain, calm your system down first, so that you're not in that kind of on edge state where your brain is looking around all the time. And banning social media from your life. Yes, can I say that? Is that allowed?
Yes, yeah, that is allowed. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really helpful. Yeah, okay, I'm going to try that. I'm going to try it. So I liked the list idea. I think that makes a lot of sense to me. Writing a list of all the things that I know I've got on my plate that I'm not dealing with, and put it outside my office. I really like that idea.
Yeah. And the other thing, if you're finding that you've got that short attention span, you might want to use something. I don't know if you've heard of the Pomodoro technique. I can't remember why it's called that, but it's the idea of just the way the Pomodoro technique works is you set yourself 25 minutes, you're going to work during that time, and then you take a 5-minute break and then you come back. So it's building in these really regular breaks and not expecting yourself to concentrate, say, non-stop for 2 hours, because we're not designed that way. So for example, if you know your concentration span is only about 10 or 15 minutes at the moment, maybe, set a timer, do 10 minutes or 15 minutes, and then deliberately just get up from your desk, have a walk around the room, do some stretches, whatever, have 5 minutes, and then come back, so that you're not just lapsing into distraction and sliding onto Twitter, because you're not really in control of that. And then you're getting frustrated, right?
Yeah. That's really good. That's a really good one.
It is good. I'm feeling guilty. I feel like we should be paying you for this advice. We're getting a free counselling session.
No, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Put my work to good use.
But I mean, my next question was similar, really. It's kind of on the same theme. It was for anyone experiencing stress or feeling anxious. Are there any immediate actions they can take? I mean, never mind sitting down to write. If you're feeling incredibly stressed, you're maybe not even in a position to focus on writing at all. Is there anything you can do if you feel yourself just feeling completely overwhelmed and unable to do anything? What can you do to stop that feeling or to alleviate it?
Yeah, again, I think it's a really good question, and I think it's kind of understanding a bit about anxiety and some basic anxiety management stuff. So again, if we think about that, when we're feeling anxious, again, it's our brain feeling that there's some kind of threat out there. And the worst way to be is when we haven't got a handle on what the threat is and what to do about it. So very often because the reason that we have anxiety in the first place, the reason that we haven't evolved to no longer feel anxious, is anxiety is really important. It stops us from, getting hit by buses, or, having fear is really important so that we can avoid danger. That's what it's there for. But like we were talking about before, in our modern lives, the danger is often really nebulous, or it's something that we're carrying around in our heads rather than something that's right there in front of us. So what can happen is we're kind of anxious all the time. We're supposed to be anxious when a lion jumps out of the forest, we get a massive spike of anxiety, we run away from the lion, we get safe, and our anxiety drops right back down again. That's how anxiety is supposed to work. And it's healthy in our system when it works like that. We get that spike of adrenaline, and then we get safe, and it just flushes out of our system again. But in the modern world, we just carry these anxieties around in our thoughts or in situations that go on day to day to day. And so we're just holding anxiety. We're just in a constant state of anxiety at some sort of level all the time. And that's what we call stress as well, which is really bad for the body. It's that we're never getting that drop-off of anxiety, proper drop-off of anxiety, and it's flushing out the system and now going back to baseline again. So a few sort of different categories of things that it can be helpful to think about. One is the idea of thinking that the stress and the anxiety is related to a problem that needs solving. So sometimes we're kind of just worrying about something that actually needs to be sorted out. And if we can actually, first of all, identify, what am I actually worried about? What is the specific thing that's worrying me? Because often we're kind of like worrying about, I don't know, something really vague, like this book isn't going to work. That's just, or I'm just worried about my writing. I'm worried about my writing. Well, what are you actually worried about? Because if we can get really specific, then our brains have a specific threat that they can actually try and create a solution to. Whereas if we've just got this kind of nebulous, I feel stressed, I feel worried, our brain can't do anything with that. All it can do is be scared. So sometimes I have a little a little worksheet that I often give to people, and I could probably share it. I could share it with you guys, and maybe we can put it on Twitter or something. And it's just a really nice flow chart for like how to deal with a worry.
That would be great.
So we can share that.
I don't care about anyone, the listeners. I just want it.
But it's really nice. It kind of asks you to like get specific about what you're worrying about, and then figure out, is there something you can do about it or not? And if there is something you can do, what can you do? So actually taking a problem solving stance to worry, to anxieties, rather than just worrying about them. Sometimes anxiety is coming because we've got our thoughts are really negative, that we've got lots of beliefs or assumptions about what's happening or what's going to happen, or about ourselves or about our writing, that are causing us to feel anxious. So if I'm thinking to myself, my editor hates me, I'm likely to not feel great, right? But it's really useful to remind ourselves that thoughts are not facts, that just because we think something doesn't make it true. And a really good way to figure out whether your thought is true or not is to ask yourself what the evidence is, and also to ask yourself what the evidence against that thought is. So evidence that my editor hates me, she hasn't replied to my email and it's been 2 hours since I sent it. Okay, what about evidence against this? Well, my editor normally takes longer than that to reply. Every other email I've had with her has been perfectly pleasant and friendly. There's usually kind of lots of other evidence that suggests that your editor does not hate you. But once we get that thought in our head and we're acting as if it's real, we just feel awful. So being able to actually spot what we're thinking and sort of reality check it a little bit, that can be useful. And then I think remembering that, again, as kind of very primitive creatures, really, when we're anxious, we're holding a lot of that anxiety in our body. And it can become a sort of feedback loop, that when we're thinking about things or we've got stuff going on that makes us anxious, our bodies will be tense, or we're not breathing properly, or kind of muscles and breathing really are the basic ones, because again, that's what we used when we were cave people, to run fast and fight off lions, but our body doesn't know what to do with that physiology now. So all it does is send feedback messages to our brain to say, yeah, there's a threat out there, yeah, something's wrong, yeah, something's wrong. So again, a way of breaking that loop is some really basic body relaxation techniques, whether that's doing some gentle breathing, whether that's doing some gentle like stretching or yoga or going for a walk. So just to calm the body down. If we can calm the body down, that can help calm the mind down.
That's amazing. That has been so useful. Thank you so much. You talk such sense, Philippa, obviously being a psychologist, but so that's blown me away completely. Everything you've said just makes complete sense, but you've also given us some really fantastic tips just on things we can do, which is I'm going to watch this back and really take some notes, I think, and take away a lot from this. So thank you.
Yeah, and I can share some resources with you for sure.
I would love that. Thank you. Yeah. My final question was, if you met someone who was about to have their book, just signed a deal, was about to have their book published, and they sort of said, right, I can see that it can be quite stressful. Like, what's your top tip for author wellbeing? What can I do to try and make sure I keep myself at a good level? Have you got like a one or two good top tips? I know you've given us all so many already.
I've got loads. So I think trying to do your research is good. So if you can try and read about what other authors are saying about the experience of being published, because I think, again, in terms of uncertainty, having a bit of knowledge of what you're getting into can really help, so that you're not knocked off balance by thinking, oh yeah, I thought this was going to be so dreamy, and why has this gone wrong, and why has that gone wrong? I mean, definitely for me, listening to authors like you who are, those few rungs up the ladder from where I am, the Honest Authors podcast, I'm sure you guys know as well, is really, really helpful for me when I was getting into that, the world of publishing. I think something that we do a lot is comparing with other authors, right? We do it all the time. And I think it's so important to, I always think, like, don't compare to other authors, because we'll always choose the person who's doing better than us, because that's the way our brains are wired, again, because we we have aspirations upwards. We don't have aspirations downwards. So we always look up when we make comparisons. That's kind of, again, naturally how we're wired. So be really mindful of that's naturally going to be the bias in your thinking, that you will compare up. And if we compare up, sometimes it's inspirational, but sometimes it can make us just feel lesser about our own situation. So I always think the best thing to compare with is ground zero, right? Always. So if you sell, this is something I heard from Sophie Hannah, which I thought was so good. If you sell 4 books in an event, be like, yes, I sold 4 books, which is 4 more than 0. And that means 4 more readers are going to enjoy my books. And that's great. Doesn't mean that I don't want to sell more books in due course, but yay, I sold 4 books, rather than like, oh, I heard that so-and-so sold 150 books at their event and I've only sold 4. So compare it to ground zero, right? Everything that you do, every step that you take, everything that you achieve is greater than 0, right? So that's always going to be a way to experience successes. Like people say, oh, I want to experience success. Well, that means every time you have a success, like selling 4 books, see it as a success, and then you will experience it as a success. Therefore, you will experience success. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. That is such good advice, and we're all guilty of that, aren't we? Sort of comparing ourselves, even if we don't intend to. It just happens, doesn't it? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And knowing that our brains are wired like that can make you a little bit more savvy. And I think the other things are connect with other authors that you trust, so you don't feel so alone, so that you've got that support from people who get it. Be like, this is something I'm learning as I get past being a sort of bright-eyed debut, but sort of having the assertiveness to push for some control and push for things in your own career, like not just being passive about everything. So much is uncertain, so much is not guaranteed. But if you want something to happen, just ask for it, or put it out there, or take the steps and push back against things that you don't want. I always say don't read reviews, but everyone's specific about that. But this is my formula for reviews. Okay, here's my top tip with reviews. Ask yourself the question, what do I want to get out of reading the review? And the answer will be individual to you. It might be like feedback so I can make my next novel better. But typically it's, I want to read reviews so that I can tell how people are finding my book. Specifically, I want to read reviews so that I can be reassured that people are enjoying my book. So I'm reading reviews to try and make myself feel better about how things are going with my book, because I'm not feeling very sure about it. So that's what you want as the outcome. I want to feel better from reading my review because I need some reassurance right now. Typically, we go on and read some reviews, but because our brains naturally are biased towards threat, i.e. negativity, the negative reviews will always jump out at you over the positive ones. People always say, why does that happen? Why does one negative review throw me? It's the way our brains are wired, because we need to look out for lions, not pretty flowers, right? So typically those negative reviews will be the ones that jump out to us. And that tends to make us feel like, oh, it's not going very well with my book, so I feel rubbish. So the outcome that I wanted to get from reading my review is not the outcome that I'm getting. So I'm like, if this behavior, reading my reviews, is not resulting in the outcome that I want, i.e. feeling better, I need to stop reading my reviews. If the outcome of reading your reviews is providing you with what you want, fine, crack on. If it's not, don't whinge, just stop doing it. That's my top tip on reviews.
Excellent tips. And like Laurie said earlier, I can't wait to listen to this back, because I want to just enjoy it and get hear it all again.
Yeah,
it's so interesting. No, that's fabulous. We do, we'll give you a little break from your giving us advice role now, because you've done very well.
I can go for hours, don't worry.
We usually love to ask our guests what they're reading at the moment, or what they've just finished reading, and whether there's anything they're particularly looking forward to read. So, what's been on your bedside cabinet lately?
So I'm just finding a few pictures, because I've got one of the books, a physical copy. So the first one that I read recently, which I loved, is this one, which has got such a good cover as well, which is True Story by Kate Reid Petty, which I thought was so, just really original and yeah, I really enjoyed it. And then the other one that I wanted to mention, here we go. This is by a writer called Victoria Dowd. It's part of a series called the Smart Women series. And this one is her third one. It's called The Supper Club Murders. And she sort of writes in a sort of updated Agatha Christie style, lots of dark comedy in her books. Really, really sort of refreshing take on the classic murder mystery, really. So this is Victoria Dowd, The Supper Club Murders, third in her series, which I've just loved. Yeah,
I like the sound of that one.
Yeah.
I like
And
the
I
sound
loved
of them, but that sounds really.
Yeah, I got True Story for Christmas and I read it like quite quickly. I really enjoyed it. As you said, it's very absorbing and very poignant, I think, read. A really good one.
And what about you, Lauren? What have you been reading lately?
So I have read two books. One of them was This Girl, That Girl by Leslie Cara, which was very amazing, as always, really kept me going. And then the other one was The Verdict by C.J. Cooper, who I met in Harrogate and thought was really lovely. So I really wanted to read her book, and I listened to it on Audible. And it's a story about a juror who they don't commit a man of a crime, and she begins to suspect that he might actually have done it. And so she it's sort of the after what happens after the verdict. And it was, for me, probably one of the most brilliant and surprising characterizations I've ever read. The main character just blew me away. So I would highly recommend that one as well. So they're my two reads. Have you managed to read anything, Leslie? Or are you
well, I finished the one I was talking about last week.
Oh yes,
Vine Street, absolutely fantastic. I thoroughly recommend this. He's such a good writer, Dom Nolan. Really inventive.
Looks like a big one as well. Big read.
It is a big one, but the thing is, it's so readable. It's so readable that you whiz through it. Soho from the 1930s onwards through the decades, and a detective story. It's fantastic, absolutely fantastic. But I haven't really read anything else because, as you can see, I've had a few boxes to pack lately. But I hope to get into my reading mojo once everything's more settled.
Yeah, a few more weeks. So now it's on to our fun question. And so, as they say, laughter is the best medicine. We wondered, what was the last thing that made you LOL?
Oh, well, I love laughing, actually. I just love to laugh. And if no one's making me laugh, I'll just tell jokes to myself and giggle at myself. So, yeah, but my husband and I have been watching Seinfeld recently, which we both really enjoy. And we were watching an episode where, I don't know if you know Seinfeld very well, but anyway, there's an episode where one of the characters manages to get himself in trouble for saying bless you after somebody sneezes, and his friend says we shouldn't say bless you, we should just say you're so good looking. So then my husband caught a cold this week, and every time he sneezed, I've just gone up to him and be like, you're so good looking. He's like, oh. But I thought it was funny. So yeah. But then now I've caught his cold. So
oh no.
I think the joke's on me.
Oh.
Yeah. So that's made me laugh.
What about you, Leslie?
Well, I was listening to a new podcast, actually, the Adam Buxton podcast. I don't know how I heard about it. I think he was on the One Show, and they mentioned it, and I thought, I've never listened to that. And it started way back in 2015, and I like to go from the very beginning. So I listened to the first episode, which is where he's interviewing Louis Theroux, and they're having a chat about those hotel, when you go and stay in a hotel and you can help yourself to as much as you want from the buffet, and you have and he was talking about nicking things from the breakfast buffet to save buying lunch and things. It sounds awful, but it was just so funny, and it really, really made me giggle. And of course, Louis Theroux didn't agree with doing that at all, and then they started talking about all sorts of funny things. But it's not kind of, well, it did make me laugh out loud, but it's not kind of laugh out loud, but it's just so gently amusing. And as I was lying in bed listening to it, I just found myself giggling, and it was really good. So I'm probably going to listen to the rest of them. I've got quite a few years worth of that podcast to catch up.
Oh, that's good.
And you, Laurie, what's been making you
Mine,
laugh?
I think yesterday, I took a lovely walk along the river because it was such nice weather with my daughter and the dog, and we got a 99 from the place in Dedham that we like to go to, and we bought Rodney one for the first time. He normally has little bits of ours, but we bought him his own one, and just the way he ate it, just like he liked to lick it, like we all lick ours. Like he wouldn't just go for it. It was proper, just took it like a child would eat a 99. It was just so funny watching him do it. So that really made me laugh yesterday. But yes, that's it.
Brilliant.
Oh. Well, I think that's all we've got time for today, which is a shame because I could listen to you, Philippa, talking about how to deal with stress for hours because it's been absolutely invaluable. And I'm sure our listeners will really appreciate listening to some of the things you've been talking about as well. You've given us real food for thought, and we'll start putting those relaxation techniques in practice the minute we stop recording, I think.
Yeah, I certainly couldn't agree more with that. So thank you from me as well. On our next episode, we're talking to Louise Mangos on the topic of working with an independent publisher, which I think is going to be rather fascinating because we had Susie Lyons talking about a digital publisher a couple of series ago now, and that was really fascinating. So it'd be really interesting to get Louise's view on independent publishers. That's our next episode.
Which just leaves me with the task of saying thank you to our lovely guest, Philippa East, today, whose novel Safe and Sound sounds like an absolute corker and is not one to be missed. And so now it's time to say goodbye from Philippa. It's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from her.